Hi, and welcome to the Art of Film Funding. I'm your co-host, Claire Papin, along with writer-producer Carol Dean, author of the best-selling book, The Art of Film Funding, and host of this show. Carol is the president of From the Heart Productions, a nonprofit organization that has supported filmmakers with the Roy W. Dean Grant, fiscal sponsorship, education, and resources for over 30 years. Carol also teaches the Learn Producing class. Each class features an industry expert guest instructor and is designed to give the information, guidance, and support to become a successful producer. You can learn more about this class and all of From the Heart Productions offerings at FromTheHeartProductions.com. Our very special guest, Beth Basa Pielert, is a producer, director, writer, and editor. She recently produced and co-directed Salmon People Preserving a Way of Life with Darrell Hillaire, executive director of the Lummi Media Company, Children of the Setting Sun Productions. The film is now airing on PBS through WORLD Local U.S.A. Beth founded Good Film Works in 2001 while writing and directing Out of the Poison Tree, a documentary that explores truth and reconciliation for survivors of the Cambodian Genocide. Under Good Film Works, Beth has produced documentaries for Apple Inc., IDEO, and Reach for Home. Her documentary credits include The Corporation, winner of over 24 international awards, including the Sundance Audience Award, and Claiming the Title, Gay Olympics on Trial, winner of 6 awards, including Best Documentary at Palm Springs International Short Fest. And Carol, Beth is sponsored by From the Heart, right?
Yes, Claire. Beth and I have worked together for many years, and we're so happy to have you join us, Beth.
Thank you. Sorry, frog here. Thank you so much, Carol and Claire, for having me on your show today. I really appreciate it.
Great. We're going to have a lot of fun and learn a lot because you spent nearly 5 years immersed in the Lummi nation's story. So what did it require of you personally and professionally to stay in right relationship while directing the film?
Well, I wanted to say I was very fortunate to be asked to help work on this film that was already in progress in many respects. Darrell and I became friends back in 2017 when I first went up to Lummi Nation, working in development on a TV series that actually From the Heart is a sponsor of, Leaves Awaken. And during COVID, Darrell would host these amazing Zooms called From the Heart. There's a lot of synchronicity here. And these were Zoom gatherings that were cross-cultural and invited people to come together and gather despite the fact that we had to be, siloed because of COVID. And we would learn from one another and share stories and share ways of coping during this time. And it was during COVID and these From the Heart Zooms that Darrell asked me to come help him make the feature film, Salmon People, Preserving a Way of Life. And I feel like this film has been such a collaboration, not just with Darrell, but with the Salmon People, the families that we tell the story of as they're fishing and meeting this moment, and working closely with them. And even I had the option of living with them, really helped me continue to learn and learn something we call protocol, which is how to be respectful and and act accordingly within the laws of the tribe and Lummi Nation.
Wow, that's a very important area. You're absolutely right. So, how did trust shape the storytelling process? You're talking about trusting and learning and sharing.
Uh, well, that is a really good question. I think relationship and trust come over time. And we did have a couple of challenges on this film. I want to say the first, it's probably not quite correct to call it a challenge, but we lost Scha'nexw Elhtal'nexw, who is really the inspiration for this film. You know, he was a wonderful leader and fisherman, and he actually passed before I came on board to the film. It was really important to follow protocol around not sharing his image or saying his name. And part of my coming on had to carefully navigate all of that with the families with regards to research. And then when it was appropriate to talk about him and start to gather his story and what he did for Indian country, especially with regards to sovereignty, by that time we had already spent a couple fishing seasons together and we had really become family.
Oh, how wonderful. And I don't know about this. They don't mention the name of someone who died for a certain amount of time. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and I can't really get too into that. It's not my place, but there's definitely protocol around when someone's passed, and it's something that I don't I've only learned a small amount about, and it's just I follow the lead of Lummi there, and that's what I did with regards to the film and how to be, and it just things take time. That's the other thing. There's like this time is really different. I think my whole background has been about how to be an efficient producer, you know, get things done in a straight line as fast as possible,
Yes,
right? Yeah. That all got turned on its head
I
when I
see.
started working with Lummi Nation, and I learned quite a lot, and I'm still learning. And it's this idea of timing. You know, there's so much, I guess you could use the word divine. There were many magical divine things that happened on this project that were completely out of my control and reminded me that I have really no control. I have intention, good intentions, and respect, and these values I'm trying to follow. But other than that, it's kind of like what John Lennon said, you know, life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. That is very much the case with documentary filmmaking, right? It's like you can have this idea of the film and your thesis and where you want it to go, but then life happens and all of it is out of your control and it just unfolds the way the story naturally will unfold.
That's a great way to look at it. Well, let's get into the challenges or ifs. Filming outdoors in such a dynamic living landscape over the course of so many seasons. How did you handle that? Light changes, weather changes, all of those things.
Well, I want to say where Lummi Nation fishes, the fishing grounds, it's really beautiful. It's the islands. So you're in the San Juan, what we would sort of commonly refer to as the San Juan and Gulf Islands. And it's the Salish Sea. You're surrounded by forested, kind of like in some cases, mountainous islands. And it's just a very peaceful place to be, unless there's a storm. But we were generally pretty lucky and we had wonderful, I mean, these fishers have been fishing forever. So they know the water and they know how to sort of take care of their crew. So I feel like, yes, there were opportunities, we were in storms, and but mainly we had pretty good weather, and mainly it was just so unbelievably beautiful to be on the water with the salmon people fishing. If anything, the two things that were disturbing and reflective of this moment that we're at, when we're sockeye fishing, is the heat. We had a pretty extreme heat wave during sockeye fishing of 2022. We also had a lot of fire smoke. And this combination is not good for people and it's not good for animals. And salmon do not like warm water. So that was absolutely affecting the run and the presence or lack thereof of the sockeye.
It's amazing. All right. Well, as a filmmaker and a guest in the community, how did you navigate telling a story that centers Indigenous sovereignty and spiritual relationship with salmon and not be imposing as an outsider? You had to really be part of the group.
Well, I want to thank Darrell and Tomas Ellie Kinley and the Solomons, Steve Solomon and his whole family, because I feel like there was such a beautiful friendship there, and that I feel like enabled us to make really good work together. And I learned a lot. I mean, there's just a lot of learning, and part of my, I would say, biggest humbling learning was around not being so pushy or being so focused on a deadline. And that would come up quite a lot. And I would very gently, in a loving way, be reminded around the nature of things. And then I would say pretty quickly, I learned that we all follow the salmon. It's really the salmon are the ones that are that we're all gathered around. This lifeway is centered on salmon, and then the film, of course, is centered on the lifeway and salmon. So we're sort of taking the cue on the natural course of salmon. And early on, both Darrell and I had conversations about this film, and Darrell knows many people. I mean, Darrell's really an incredible leader, and he's a connector, and he works cross-culturally in many areas. So Darrell would have lots of ideas and suggestions about bringing in people who were not Indigenous. And for whatever reason, I felt really strongly that we didn't want that third person perspective in this film, that this film should be for really this verite on the water with the salmon people as they're meeting this moment. And I love that we stuck with that decision because it feels like we're in it. And that's what we all kind of wanted. We wanted that feeling of being in it and on the water with the salmon and the people, and not have this like disconnected third person narrative, which is pretty conventional and common in documentary. We didn't want to do that with this film. So we were intentional with that from the beginning.
Well, that was a good choice because your film is so engaging that it's like a time warp happens. You just turn on the film and then you're gone for an hour in the Lummi Nation, and the water and the sounds and the visions. It's just a magnificent film. Thank you for making this.
Thank you. Sorry, I did want to do just one quick call out. So the director of photography on the film, John Carroll, had been working with Darrell for a few years before I came on, and he really cut his teeth as a filmmaker in many ways and a director of photography on this film. This was his first film out of college. And he spent a month filming the salmon up at the Adams River, all that amazing. Most of the underwater footage is from John. Some of it is from another incredible filmmaker in Canada named Tavish Campbell. But John he spent a month doing the underwater photography up at the Adams River. So it's just, I wanted to just give a shout out to him. And then with regards to the audio, both Scott Hirsch, who I've worked with on Out of the Poison Tree, he's the sound designer. He and I chose him to come on this project because he's an immersive audio expert. And so he and I really endeavored to bring a 360 quality to the audio so that you felt like, you could hear the sounds that the salmon people were hearing as they fished.
Exactly. And this Carol, photographer, did a marvelous job. I would never have known because having been in the film world for so many years, cinematography is one of my favorite areas, and he did an exemplary job. But okay, so tell us about the late Larry Kingsley's, how that vision it shaped the direction of the film, and what legacy did he leave in the footage and in your heart?
This is a wonderful question. Thank you, Carol. The late Scha'nexw Larry Kinley, it's wild. I never met him, but when I was working on the film, he would come to me in dreams. And part of it was because I had, footage of him. We had a really phenomenal archival researcher on the project who's Duwamish Nation and worked at Darrell's company for a while with me, Camille Troutman. And Camille found incredible old footage of Scha'nexw when he was the chairman of the tribe. So we have these, clips of him when he was this young leader. And then, of course, his family, his widow, who became a very dear friend of mine, Tomas Ellie Kinley, and then his two sons, Skilkwalton Kyle Kinley, and also Scha'nexw Lucas Kinley, who's now the skipper. They certainly embody Larry. And Larry, I feel like his words, which you hear at the beginning of the film, are sort of his guidance, which are, you really need to understand who you are and where you come from. And Oren Lyons also echoes this in the film. But another guiding light from Larry is this idea of sovereignty and sort of the practice of self-governance and what that means. And Larry actually went on to help a couple of California tribes realize their sovereignty. And this is I don't want to go down. I just realized I was going off your question. So coming back to the question, Larry was in the fabric of the film from the beginning because of the stories that I had from his family, but also the archival material that we had. And also because of Darrell. Darrell was really good friends with the late Scha'nexw Larry Kinley. And he would share that guidance with me often. And there were a couple words that we'd remind each other of, but Darrell said that Larry's last words to him were, keep going. You have to keep going.
That's great. But he was coming to you in dreams, Beth. Share that.
Well, that was wild because for me, one of the challenges was being so far from Lummi Nation. So, I'm about 1,000 miles away. And sometimes that was difficult combined with the nature of culturally you not being in the room is problematic. And then also me holding the responsibility of this and how to do it right and respectfully, I would have a lot of insecurities come up. So especially when I was editing the film, and when you're editing, you're really in this cave and you need to be. And that's when I would have my doubts come up. And that's when Larry would visit, which was really helpful, actually. But actually, one quick story about Larry and his guidance. So we were having a hard time figuring out how to open this film. And you're not seeing it as much in the film now, but you do hear it at the beginning of the film. Ellie is talking about this being a love story. It's a love story of salmon, it's a love story of our people, and it's a love story of Scha'nexw Larry Kinley. Well, that came to me through Larry. And when I would go up to Lummi to work toward the last year or so, I would stay with Ellie. And Ellie is there on the nation, and I would do a little run. And it was when I was running, trying to figure out, how are we opening this film? How are we opening this film? Well, it's a love story. It just came to me. And I know that was Scha'nexw Larry Kinley.
Sure. Isn't that wonderful? And space and time mean nothing to people on the other side. Wherever you are, they can be. It's that easy, right? Okay, so spiritual and ecological themes. Let's get into the film opens a space for viewers to ask, who are we without salmon? And how has this question evolved for you during the course of the project? That would be really hard to consider a life in a world without them.
I think it's almost impossible to consider it. I think the question is sort of like a galvanizing battle cry, if you will, to do everything we can to protect salmon, to not let that happen. To realize that if we keep going the way we're going, we are looking at the extinction of salmon. And salmon is part of a continuum of which we are a part. So we want to do everything we can to look at why salmon isn't doing well and what we can do as a species to do better by salmon, therefore doing better by ourselves. Everything is connected. So I think one of the things that comes up in the film is the legacy of Scha'nexw's optimism, and you can see that expressed through his son. Scha'nexw Lucas Kinley talks about, you got to be hopeful. My dad taught me that. So I think this question is a good one, and I personally have sort of digested it as it's our responsibility to do what we can to make sure that we have salmon for future generations.
Important, yes, important. Well, the Earth Month invites a reflection on environmental justice. So, how does the film reflect Indigenous core values like stewardship and reverence for the natural world?
Lummi are something I noticed in my time with Lummi is how responsive they feel generally when there's a problem. It's pretty remarkable. So I've witnessed this again and again, not just with salmon or the environment, but also with missing and murdered Indigenous people, or, there's a problem with uncontrolled substances on the nation, these different things that are happening, these different, you could call them problems or challenges. So with regards to the environment, Lummi has a long track record of protecting its sacred spaces. That's very important, where their ancestors are, and taking care of that, but also taking care of the waterways and the watersheds and all of the areas where salmon need to have habitat. So there's many, sort of like negotiations around farming and water use, and also habitat and the need for shade. But you'll see in the film also that from the beginning, really, for a long, long time, since the early 1800s, there has been this idea of the need to have hatcheries. So I think just to make sure that there are fish, and because so much overfishing happened in the early 1800s, where it just almost wiped out all the runs very quickly, that there's had to be a certain amount of making sure that there's fish out there to fish. And Lummi have been, along with many tribes, have been on the forefront of this hatchery based on wild fish. Okay, so you're taking wild fish and you're growing more from the wild fish, and you're making sure that enough fish are getting into the watershed system so that they can regenerate and there can be a run. But there's also this need to protect all that habitat. And as there's more development and more farming, or even looking at ways that there's pesticides that get into the watersheds, you have to kind of back up and look at all of it,
Yeah.
and really take some responsibility on consumer choice, or like what we can do with regards to how we handle our own transportation, all these things, right? But if you can understand it, you can kind of pick then, well, where can I make a choice that's going to be helpful? Where can I make a choice that would be harmful? And I think it just comes down to education and following the lead of people who've been centered around salmon since time immemorial. I mean, we're talking thousands of years. So for thousands of years, many tribes referred to themselves as salmon people, and they've been taking care of the natural world, and their core values of respect and sharing and gratitude. And only about 400 years, I mean, if you look at like contact, when the ships came over, that we call that contact. It's only
Uh-huh.
been about a few hundred years. I mean, look at how fast we've nearly wiped things out, right?
Amazing. We've done a really great
We've done
job.
a lot of damage in a short amount of time. So I think it's
Yes.
learning where we're at and looking at, the guidance of Scha'nexw Elhtal'nexw. You have to understand where you come from and you have to understand where you're at to kind of make your decisions about the future. It's Larry and Oren. They're echoing that to remind us. And I think right now, especially in this time of the erasure of history, I feel particularly proud and passionate about making sure people see the film because you're learning a little bit about our history to understand how we got here so that we can, make a difference and ask ourselves, who are we without salmon? And how can we recorrect this course we're on? Because we can make some different choices.
We can, and we should, yes. So how you pretty much wrapped this up, but personally, what do you feel that the film does to teach us about our interconnectedness to the water, the land, and to the winged and the finned, all of us, how we are so interconnected?
Well, you have these beautiful words of Chief Wayne Christensen, who's talking about, how salmon feed all of us. They feed the water and they feed the four-legged, they feed the winged. And then when they're spawning and they give their bodies over, they're also just feeding the water itself. They're feeding, the plants and things.
Yes,
So I feel like that, and also the story that Steve Solomon talks about Grandpa Felix and Grandma Dora, um, sharing those values of listening, deep listening, to the water and the wind and these things. I think I just recently went to Bioneers, which is a conference we have here that's really pretty wonderful. It's this convening of indigenous artists, musicians, scientists. It's a pretty phenomenal conference here in the Bay Area that happens every March. And there was a guest, Cesar Rodriguez, who shared some of his work where he's been recording in the cloud forest. And Cesar said to us, when we hear nature, when we hear the sounds of nature, it connects us to our responsibility to it. And I just loved that because I love nature. I like also with film that you can see it, but you can also hear it. And that deep listening and tuning in, it made a lot of sense to me that connects us to our responsibility to it.
yes, it does. And this is so important to listen when you're in nature, to listen. Uh, so let's go to the teachings of the salmon. Uh, Now, protecting salmon is a full-time job. So what can it teach us about endurance, adaptability, and the power of returning to our source? I love this because we all have to return to the source, and they seem to do it with no compulsions.
Yeah, Tomas Ellie Kinley, Scha'nexw Elhtal'nexw widow, uh, talks about salmon, protecting salmon being her full-time job. And I think in the film, you really get a real sense for her passion as a fisher and being on the water and the importance of protecting this lifeway for, her great great grandchildren, you know.
Right.
So with salmon, something that blew my mind because I learned so much working on this film, still learning so much. It's sort of mind blowing to understand that they're born into fresh water and then they learn to actually travel into salt water and they, go way out into the deep ocean to sort of pasture out there and fatten and eat and navigate. And that could be years. And then they come back to the original, rivers where they were born. I mean, if you imagine the fragility of all of this and all that they encounter, you definitely would want to get out of their way so they could do their job.
Yeah,
But
right.
they're very committed. There's a adaptability inherent in salmon, adaptable going from fresh to salt and back to fresh. That's like adaptability. And
Yes.
then there's this enduring, committed journey. I mean, salmon can travel up to 6,000 miles in their lifetime. It's wild. And
And
there's this smell and genetic encoding. Even something that I find really hopeful, when they pulled the dams down on the Elwha and also on the Klamath River, it only took like 5 to 10 days for almost all 5 species to return. These dams have been in their way for decades. And then when you pull them down, they come back. It doesn't take long. That's pretty remarkable.
yes, so they're communicating with each other.
They're following a sense of smell, I guess. I mean, they're just, you can't keep a good salmon down, I guess.
Well said, right. Okay. So they are Olympic level navigators, right? Genetically encoded to journey thousands of miles, only return and give their lives. And so, what we have to really understand, and please help us, what do their life cycles teach us about selflessness and service?
Yeah, I mean, they're sort of the epitome of pivoting and adaptation. Salmon are not seeking comfort. You know, it's quite the opposite. They are designed to give of themselves, to make a great journey, adapting to various climates and situations. Many of them are dangerous, only to come back and literally give their life to regenerate and then give their life and body and flesh to feed. It's pretty wild. I think they can give us a lot of food for thought around how to think beyond ourselves, how to maybe think less about how comfortable we can be and how we can actually serve the greater good.
Yes.
And yeah, this idea of like impermanence, I think, can be really liberating. Because if you think of your life as like, okay, I'm here for the time I'm here, what can I do? How can I like positively contribute to things while I'm here and use my time? It's something I ask myself, and I think learning more about salmon has certainly encouraged me to do so.
The British biologist Sheldrake is teaching us about morphic resonance, so that nature has a memory, nature itself, and the salmon and nature are connected, and this, right? And they know instinctively what to do and how to do it. It's amazing. And that's showing us how we are so connected to every living thing, that it's important. What the film you've made is really one of the greatest films I've ever seen for connectivity. You really get into the world, into the fish world, and understand they know their job, and they've dedicated their lives to feed us, and it's an amazing film. So let's get into the legacy. So, what do you want young Indigenous viewers to take away from this film? And what about non-Native audiences? What responsibility do we have after watching your film?
Thank you. This is a really good question because one of the things I noticed, the film is streaming right now. So we have these wonderful partners in GBH Boston and Vision Maker Media, and it's streaming It's both being broadcast on PBS and then it's streaming on the WORLD Local U.S.A. YouTube channel. So you can find it if you look for Salmon People, Preserving a Way of Life. And I was looking at some of the comments when the film first came out. And, you know, sometimes when we look at our true history, it can rub people the wrong way. Especially, I've noticed with non-Indigenous people. Some people can feel a little pushed back on their heels. And I don't want to do that. Our goal is not to point fingers or say, it's your fault, or because that's not going to necessarily get us anywhere. I do think it's valuable for us to understand a little bit of our true history so that we can appreciate and learn from our mistakes and how we might do better for the collective good. So I do feel very passionate about facing our true history. And I think when we learn things about our American history, you know, some of our American history is quite difficult to confront, but we absolutely have to do it. We need to understand how our country was founded so that we can heal from that and move forward. I feel like until we do that, we really kind of can't move forward. So for me, the film, just in its small way, helps us look at some of our history so that we can understand where we're at, so that, again, we can move forward together. And it is about coming together. I think that many of the people in the film, of which I feel like I'm more of a facilitator rather than the person who made the film. This film was made by many people, mainly the salmon people, who were kind enough and trusting enough to let us be on their boats while they were fishing, trying to make a living for themselves and their family during wildfires and warming oceans when the fish really weren't coming in. It was a pretty stressful time, but they trusted us, right? And I think there's a trust there because there's a common agreement that we want to help educate and also do better for future generations. So the film is super, it's inherently Indigenous. I mean, John and I are not Indigenous, but we've been entrusted and guided to help come together to make this work together. And I think something I love about Darrell Hillaire and what he gifted many of us during COVID and what guided the film too is we all need to come together.
That's it. Now we're learning that more than
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of the elephant. So we didn't record this, but that just the story of recently there was an earthquake down in Southern California. I think it was yesterday. And the elephants at the San Diego Zoo, when there was an earthquake, the elders all gathered around the youngster and protected it. I mean, it's just like the most beautiful thing. You can look this up. And I think the film's important for Indigenous viewers to understand some of the history and understand sovereignty and understand this life way and why it's so important and that it gets passed on. This information is shared on the water, and there's an importance of being on the water. And hopefully the film is an invitation to return to the water and be on the water. But I also feel like I don't really necessarily want to separate Indigenous viewers from non-Indigenous viewers, even though I guess we have to mention it. I really feel like the film is for everybody. And it's an opportunity to literally be on the water, which is pretty incredible, with the salmon people and understand this moment we're at. We're at an extraordinary moment with the climate and with the fish, and that's telling us a lot about ourselves.
exactly. Thank you for that. Now, how has working with children of the Setting Sun Productions shifted your own storytelling lens? And how do you see this kind of work transforming the documentary landscape moving forward?
Yeah, that's so funny. That's a big question, Carol. That's a big one. I feel super lucky. I just want to say I feel fortunate and very grateful that I had the opportunity to make this work with Children of the Setting Sun Productions and with the Salmon People. And for me, the biggest gift was becoming family with the Kinleys and the Solomons. That's like, to me, I didn't expect that to happen, and it happened, and it's beautiful.
Oh, no.
Um, I feel like with regards to my storytelling lens, it's definitely, I feel like it's blown the doors off the idea of working in a silo. And it's something that I'm really trying to work with now. I know this is audio, but behind me is this work I did recently developing a new documentary series that is about meeting the moment we're at right now and trying to invite more perspectives to the table. And I think I'm really interested in that and working outside of a silo and navigating different perspectives so that we can listen to one another and move toward working together instead of being divided. So I think in a lot of ways I've learned more about slowing down, listening more, and working cross-culturally. I also, it wasn't always easy working on this project. I encountered some challenges, and I think, part of that is looking at my own role in interpersonal dynamics and working relationships and being reflective about my role in things that don't work as well as they could and being humbled by that, but also understanding also what kind of collaborations I want in the future and working toward that.
That's a lot to achieve. That's wonderful. Well, tell us about Leaves Awaken. That's one of my favorite of your projects. Is that coming soon? What's the story on that?
Yeah, so Leaves Awaken that's what first brought me to Lummi Nation. So Leaves Awaken was a project that came to me after Standing Rock, and it's born from my own experiences as someone who is growing up feeling very different as a Jewish, eventually I came to realize I was a gay person, but living in a community that was mostly white Anglo-Saxon and very straight, just feeling like a different person and sort of finding my solace in the forest. I used to kind of run away to the trees a lot when I was growing up. And after Standing Rock, for whatever reason, I think because I'd just been exposed to something that changed my life, and that was this concept of people coming together in a nonviolent way to stand up for their life way and the water and people and their indigenous life and the land. So I just been exposed to all of that, and I came home and I was pretty depressed because the pipeline was being completed, and it was a pretty dark time. So I started writing this script, and it just kind of came out of me, about 11 pages of this young person who is disconnected from her roots, and she's trying to find her mom. And I got about 11 pages in, and I thought, well, this is crazy because I'm making this person half Indigenous and I'm not Indigenous. So I really don't feel right continuing in this way unless I get permission. So I met Lummi Nation at Standing Rock, and I was really impressed because they drove up this huge seafood feast from Seattle area to feed the water protectors. And more than the food, they really taught, that's when I first learned the core values of gratitude and sharing and respect. So it was nourishing us spiritually too. This like coming together in prayer and sharing and gratitude. So I just loved that. So the characters have Lummi Nation. I'm 11 pages in. So I decide I'm going to cold call someone from Lummi Nation. And I find them on the website, and I find this person Lena So, and I cold call her. And I'm kind of nervous as the phone's ringing, hoping it goes to voicemail, but she answers. And I introduce myself, let her know I'm writing the script and I don't want to get too far if it doesn't resonate, and can I share it? And if it feels okay, maybe we could meet. So that's how I started working with Lummi Nation. It was really through the 11 pages of Leaves Awaken and calling Lena So. Lena read the 10 pages within 2 hours. She liked them. She said, "This looks good. Come up. Let's have a meeting." And from there, that's when I had a 6 hour meeting with her. And she introduced me to Darrell. And one thing led to another. And before you knew it, I was working with a First Nations writer director, Marie Clements, who's a Dene woman, incredible writer director. She's based up on Galiano Island. And we wrote a pilot, and the pilot got shortlisted for Sundance, and we were kind of cooking. And then we didn't get into Sundance, and then COVID happened. And so what happened with Leaves Awaken is COVID kind of shut everything down. And Darrell and I deepened our relationship during COVID through his From the Heart gatherings, and me going up there and working with him and his team on canoe journey stuff. And before you know it, he's asking me to help him make Salmon People. So now that Salmon People is completed and it's being broadcast and it's being shared, and we have this incredible study guide that came out of the Setting Sun Institute, and we're helping educators teach the work. Now that that's on its way, I'm returning to Leaves Awaken. But I will say that it's in this landscape with everything that's going on with our own government and money and all those things. I'm feeling that Leaves Awaken might need to still wait a bit longer, because it is a pretty ambitious television show that is set, 1,000 miles north of me. And so I feel called to do some work that's local right now. And so I'm working on some things at a local level in the Bay Area, while I think how to forward Leaves Awaken.
Okay. It is a great story, but timing is the most important part. So you're right. If you feel you have to wait, you do. I can tell you from working with so many filmmakers over all these years that sometimes the universe says, not now, not now. And then it'll say, this is the moment. And you know it. You know it. I've seen that happen. One time there was a film about stunt women, and she couldn't get funded, and she couldn't get behind the cameras wouldn't let her come in and shoot the stunt women working on TV shows. So she went to New Zealand, and there was a great film with stunt woman down there. They said, "Come on over, we don't care." So she went over there, she shot that, and then it just stopped. And then I think it was Quentin Tarantino's wife got involved, and that was it. That was the time everything just took off. And this has happened. I've seen this happen over and over. The universe knows, and so if you stay tuned in, like meditating every day, connecting with the universe, you'll know. But in the meantime, that's a wonderful project to continue to develop in your mind, Beth.
Thank you. I've always appreciated your guidance and encouragement and belief. So thank you so much, Carol.
Hey, well, tell us now exactly how people can see the film.
Sure. So, Salmon People Preserving a Way of Life is being broadcast through the World channel on PBS stations. So, you can actually tune into your local PBS station, through your cable or through your Apple TV or Roku, however you access television. You can check to see if you have World, and if you have World, you can find our program there. And it's going to be broadcasting at different times for the next few years. Another way to get the film right away is through the World Local U.S.A. YouTube channel. So you can just go onto YouTube, look up WORLD Local U.S.A. And once you're there, type in Salmon People Preserving a Way of Life, and you'll find our film.
Okay. Definitely appreciate that. All right, Beth. Well, best of luck to you. Claire and I really appreciate the work you're doing to teach us how connected we are to each other, to nature, and what responsibilities we have.
Well, thank you so very much. I appreciate the work you're doing, and thank you for collecting the story. And I hope y'all have a wonderful day. And I'll have to share you the video of the elephants.
Yes, yes.
I'll share that now.
Yes, thank you. That would be wonderful. And I also want to share my gratitude with you for pouring your heart into the work you're doing and the ability that you have, the gifts that you have, that you bring to what you're doing, and how I've just from this short interview feel like there's a lot more to you than meets the eye and the heart. So we're looking forward to more of what you have in store. Thank you very much for everything.
Thank you. Thank you. You're very kind.
But thanks. We'll see you again in the future, I'm sure.
All right. Sounds good, you two. Have a great day.
Yes, be well, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye.
Now, in its second edition, Carol Dean's popular book, The Art of Film Funding, has 12 new chapters to cover all areas of film financing and how to avoid expensive pitfalls. Learn how to start with an idea and end with a trailer, how to make an ask for money, create your story structure and your trailer, legal advice, fair use, successful crowdfunding, how to ask for music rights, and what insurance you can't shoot without. Available on Amazon under Carol Dean and at FromTheHeartProductions.com. I want to remind our listeners that David Raiklin is a brilliant and talented award-winning musician who scores films and can compose music for a trio or for a full orchestra. David is a very good friend to the independent filmmaker and comes highly recommended by From the Heart Productions. If you need music to help tell your story, please contact him at davidraiklin.com. That's David, RAIKLEN.com. And Carol and I want to thank you for tuning in to The Art of Film Funding. Please visit our website at FromTheHeartProductions.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Good luck with your films, everyone.